1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. I ain't counting to 3. That's a little bit too much. Shalom, you shaved apes. Bit later than originally planned because, well, just because I have to answer to you. You're not me mum. Welcome or not welcome, as the case may be. Tonight I've been asked to talk about because I keep throwing it out there for people. Have a go at giving us an idea, and I'll talk about it. It means I don't have to plan or think of anything. I just come off the cuff, and hopefully that works for you. Yeah. So emotions was what I was given to contend with this week. And it's weird because I had a friend of mine said today, but you don't have emotions, Dad. So I must come across as right cunt. I guess what she means is that I tend to perform my character out, and it doesn't seem to be at the mercy of emotions, which is what most people sort of take from it. You know, when we explain emotions to children, we call them feelings, don't we? Because you know, they're probably generated by the brain. That's probably where they're from. But we do get feelings, sensations. You know, when we're scared, that whole adrenaline shit kicks in, and our fucking gut goes, and perhaps we get a little bit sweaty, and you know, the blood pumps around for the muscles a little bit more. So there's something functional with fear that we would have needed in terms of sort of evolutionary biology. We would have needed that for our species to continue. So we call them feelings. I mean, certainly when we're happy, we get we get a bit sort of lightheaded and giddy, you know. We can get, you know, sweaty palms again. Like, you know, I tend to get sweaty palms fucking whatever I'm doing, to be fair. But you know, sadness hits us somewhere in the chest, and obviously it affects our you know, our tear ducts, and we start pissing water down our face, you know. So emotions, certainly when we're describing them to children, we call them feelings, you know, which is a fascinating fucking thing, because they're probably generated by the mind. Let's face it, they're probably generated by how the brain is working its way through the world we're experiencing. So why our body should experience those, it doesn't always make sense. Like I said, with fear, it kind of makes sense. You know, if you see going way back, if we see some form of threat from the animal kingdom, but you know, largely that's going to be the case. We get that fight, flight, or freeze. Fight, flight. Yeah, it's 3, isn't it? Fight, flight, or freeze. So we batter it, or we fucking leg it from it, or we stand really still like it thinks we're a tree, you know. So there's a function to those feelings coming from that emotion. Is there from other things? Is there a function to feeling joy? You know, is there a function to being happy? What does that do, just in terms of us surviving? You know, because you see animals look like they're having fun. There's all sorts. You know, I'm not a fan of sharks. Fucking hell, no. I've got a real phobia of sharks. But there was a video of how it happened, I don't know, of somebody petting a fucking great white. You know, it's returned and built a relationship up. You know, so even animalistic sort of tendency, something that is just pure fucking you know, eat and sleep. Even that can show some sort of emotional attachment to someone. And I don't know if it's fucking smiling. I didn't look that close. It scares the shit out of me. Dogs do. Dogs look like they're smiling, you know. So there's something that's going on there with all creatures, where there is an emotion to it. And why? What's the purpose of being happy? You know, it makes the day go faster. Certainly, it gives us. I know. Perhaps it's. Yeah, no, perhaps it's when we're happy and we're comfortable, we feel secure. Yes, when we're happy and we're comfortable around another person, perhaps that's that we, you know, just in terms of sort of evolutionary biology, is perhaps that's where we where we feel secure. So we feel like, well, this other person can be a mate, or this other person can, which would of course perpetuate species. This other person can be like a hunting partner. This other person can help with forage. You know, he's not, or she's not, a threat. So that feeling of happiness to be around someone may have a function in that way. So my friend said to me, "You don't have emotions, Dad," which I thought was fucking great, you know, because the way I, you know, go about things the way I do, you know, with great love, but it's almost like an abstract idea that I express it, and it's not something where I become overly affectionate or outwardly sad, and you know, those sorts of things. And I guess where that comes from, the reason she said that is because my mental disorder, which could arguably be an emotional disorder, but you know, medicine says that it comes from the mind, from the way the brain functions. That's certainly how we're medicated, to make serotonin receptors work in different ways. So I'm less of a fucking weirdo than I would be otherwise. So I guess it could be seen as an emotional disorder. So that's, yeah, okay, emotions are something that they're a brain function. Yeah, that's cool. I think what she's getting at is that because my disorder, my illness, is one that prevents me from regulating emotions properly. So my sadness will become depression. I'll be sad for a very, very long time, be incredibly sad, to the point where it affects how I motivate myself, how I eat, how I take care of myself, things like that. Conversely, the mania side is something that's much more akin to euphoria, is much more akin to too much joy. And that, you know, and that can lead into sort of violence. It can lead into promiscuity, and that can lead into area. You know, there's lots of things it can lead into, but I'm just thinking in terms of sort of the emotional response of it when it goes wrong. Is more the other end of it, more the very, very sort of active end of where your emotions would be. So, you know, hate and lust and fear, and you know. Fear can also come into the depressive side, the sort of super sad side, and I guess that, you know, that, I mean, that's anxiety. Anxiety I've got as a symptom. It's not an anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, which a couple of my friends have, which is debilitating. It really is, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I have anxiety as a symptom of my depression, so that's most akin to the emotion of fear, and I guess that comes from being so caught in negative thinking, stinking thinking, that everything is catastrophized. Everything is going to be made out to be so much worse than it potentially is, and then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, you know, because you convince yourself that it's going to be terrible, so you start to panic as though it's going to be terrible, and then you start feeling the fear, which is what you've sort of created in and of yourself. So that's interesting. I just want to introduce you to my white bedding. I thought it was a really good idea getting some white bedding. I thought I'd maybe catch my virginity back, but apparently it doesn't work like that. But it made me feel good. Made me feel a bit more comfortable, a bit more, and I suppose with comfort there's that security, you know. This security and emotion we feel as though we are safe, don't we? We feel as though we're safe around one another, we're safe in a home. So there's something about that which certainly adds into how we move on as a species, how we survive as a species. What functions sadness? What the fuck has that got to do with anything, you know? And sadness can be caused in lots of ways. You know, I was quite upset with a way that I was treated recently by somebody that I considered a friend, who completely got me wrong, and I was, you know, I think quite abusive about it, to be fair. there's a part of anger in there. There's a part of like, hey, that's fucking unjust, man. Don't what are you doing that? That's not okay to say those things to me. But I think there was a deep disappointment, which felt like a sadness. It felt like, you know, I was disappointed. Yeah. So that's not the right word for that. But it was a sadness. I felt not respected. I felt let down. I misunderstood. You know. So that's the tricky thing. So you can become quite sad with the way people respond to you. Now, I'm not sure how that benefits us as a species, unless it's about us protecting ourselves from that. But I guess, you know, I'm talking about stuff as though we're just a biological entity, and actually, you know, a lot of these emotions are very well developed and developed around language and developed around our social interaction with one another, and they're important for those things. You know, certainly, you know, love and humor perhaps, you know, are important socially for us to bond and to want to bond with people, you know, to want to build communities. Those things that are necessary for that, and so they don't just have a biological process function. They're much more of a social thing. So I don't know, you can argue that animals use it for social things, and they haven't got language, they haven't got art, but they certainly use love and fear, and I don't know whether necessarily they certainly use joy. I'm not sure whether they use comedy. I've never really seen a cockatiel tell a joke. If you have, please let me know. But they certainly have joy, don't they? And that's a social thing that keeps people bonded and keeps people together. Sadness is a really weird one. So I'm not really sure on why we would have that. Why grief is the one. I always say to people, I don't grieve well, and I don't know, which is daft because there's no real way of grieving. But I do this whole, you know, very stoic thing of you know, stiff upper lip and got to be the geezer and got to fulfill all those things about, I suppose, about my masculine, about my place in family as the patriarch. Perhaps where it goes with my company, so I do the leadership thing, and I suppose that's been there for a while, and people for you know, one reason or another, for better or worse, perhaps come to me as somebody with, you know, has got something to say, knows this shit, knows a lot of people, so there's that leadership thing there. So I kind of feel as though I have to carry that responsibility in a lot of ways, but particularly in grieving, you know. And then after a while, that breaks down, and a severe sadness hits me. It's not the severe sadness, or, you know, the chronic sadness that is depression, but it's a real deep and horrible feeling. If you know that time when you sort of sob and oh, you can't catch your fucking breath, you know. Sobbing so fucking hard that it affects everything in your body, you know. So and I've always struggled with that. I've always struggled with being a bit cross with myself for being, you know, thinking that I need to be hard about things, or manage things or lead things or whatever. I have to take responsibility for other people, which is daft, because we can't ever be responsible for how anybody else is feeling. We can be responsible for how we treat them, how they respond to that, and how they feel is their baggage, isn't it, you know. And we need to bring our children up to understand that it's their responsibility for how they feel. I think there's a gap in our culture that hasn't done that. So we kind of want to blame everyone. So grieving, I'm not sure what function that does, other than it just hurts because you've lost someone that you love. I don't know whether that makes love a stronger thing by default. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what purpose it serves, but it sucks. It really sucks. And it takes a long time to put it in its place. And that sort of, was there 7 stages of grief, is there, which is happy, sneezy, lucky, I don't know, 7 stages of grief that you go through, and it's a process, you know. But I don't know what function it's got. I'm not sure why we would choose to have those feelings, you know. So anyhow, different types of sadness. That's one. I was very disappointed earlier on with a friend, and I was really sad, felt let down about that. Different sort of sad altogether. I didn't feel the need to cry. I was just was very disappointed. But yeah, moving on, you know, because I can't sort of hang on that shit. It was just fucking, yeah, it hurt, that's all. So what else have we got in terms of emotions? This is because of my illness, because of my condition. I find it difficult to regulate emotions. That's something that I heavily medicated to help me to do. So perhaps that's why she said I don't do emotions, because I mean, you know, my emotions are very much at the extreme. Then I have to medicate myself to be able to regulate those. And I guess it comes across as quite cold, quite, you know, my caring and my compassion is done in a very abstract way. It's done in a very productive and professional and cold and clinical way, perhaps. And I guess that I'll get to, you know, a lot of sort of old-fashioned masculine mannerisms are very similar to that. You know, you wouldn't necessarily cry, you wouldn't necessarily let the top lip go, and you know, you wouldn't necessarily you would respond in anger rather than in disappointment. You know, I guess they're sort of more traditional, or you know, I don't want to say that these are right or wrong, so I'm not necessarily suggesting that they are either way. But I suppose they're more traditional masculine ways of doing things. We don't tend to show our emotions. So, you know, the way they'll go about the charity work that they would be similar to that. It's abstract. It's not showing things. It's cold and it's clinical and it's done in a professional way. So I guess that's where it comes from. But yes, it made me laugh. I thought that was amusing, you know. I don't know what laughter is, why it's there. But I know that without it, I'd have a really shit life. I think, yeah, I can do without food for a certain amount of time. I can do without sexual relations for an amount of time. I can even do without necessarily being intellectually stimulated for an amount of time. I mean, notice how I put those, like, you know, I'm obviously fucking too old for a bunker. So I can do that a lot of things for a lot of time. But if I've not laughed in a while, I fucking ache, you know. And I guess that's the same for a lot of people. They need that joy in their life. But I really do. I'm really quite aware of that. I'm really quite aware that when that hasn't happened for some time, and if you know, something hasn't made me laugh. And moreover, I spend most of the time fucking making myself laugh. Do you know what I mean? I'm my own favourite comic, you know, because it gets me through the day. It allows me to feel comfortable, to relax, to be in my own skin, you know. Which is why I'm always saying daft things, and I think that's cool. I think I'm big and clever for that. It's up to you if you don't. I don't care. So humour is one, comedy, joy. Comedy's not necessarily an emotion, is it? Let's face it. But what we do, where we try to make one another laugh, again, it's almost like purely interaction, cultural, isn't it? There's a transaction there. I'm making you laugh. You are becoming more invested in me as a person. I've allowed you to have some trust. I've allowed you to perhaps see a vulnerable side. And so there's that transaction. I'm making you laugh, and you are then coming back with a lot of things that make you more comfortable as a person around me, you know. I'm not sure whether that's a fair exchange, but there is an exchange there to be had. So some of the weird ones, like worry, I think, you know, as we said earlier on, you know, it's well worth having sort of an anxiety reflex to things, because if we didn't, we all would have been eaten by fucking cannibals by now. Let's face it, it would have been, oh fucking hell, look at that rock falling, that looks wonderful, that's really funny. And without that sort of reflex of anxiety and worry, we wouldn't have got out of the way and we'd been fucking squished by the rock, you know. So worry is probably essential for our survival as sort of biological entities, you know. But what does it do sort of culturally, socially, you know? I won't give us a really fucking hard time. I think we give ourselves a load of things to worry about, and it kind of puts us in our place, doesn't it? You know, so we worry about bills, we worry about our status, we worry about whether we're achieving things by the right age, or do we own enough stuff? You know, we worry about a lot of things that are completely sort of material, and not necessarily about our safety or even in our well-being. You know, it's got nothing. There's no fucking relation to it. So we've sort of made worry a part of how we motivate ourselves, and that's curious. I tell you, right, my mate Neil, and I love the guy. I genuinely love his mind. Genuinely, when he, you know, that fucking endorphin thing when we get that someone likes things on Facebook, you know, that they well know that they're doing, and that, you know, that's a biochemistry thing, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? We know that there's the happy chemical. I can't think what it's called now. Answers on a postcard, please. I'll remember it in a minute. But I know that with, you know, all those clicks, that's what they do. So we keep coming back because it's an addictive. It's a reward mechanism one. It's the one that works with chocolate and cocaine. Oh, that's gonna bug the fuck out of me. I can't think what happy chemical's called. That's making me angry. But this guy, he's got such a beautiful mind, and I'm so envious of his use of language. That I literally, you know, have a little man crush when he, if you like something or responds to something on Facebook, it's lovely. So I love getting into an exchange with him because I feel much bigger than I think I probably am, just because I literally fucking adore his mind so much. Now we were talking about, I had there was a weird experience because I don't necessarily feel embarrassed, humiliated, shame. I don't necessarily feel those things anymore because I spent a large portion of my life doing things which were incredibly fucking shameful, incredibly. And now I'm in a place where I can be much more happy with who I am and not so desperate for people's validation. So when I don't receive it, I'm not necessarily let down by that. I'm not necessarily thinking that I've shamed myself, I've got embarrassed, you know. And that's very different from humbling. And this was the conversation I was having with Neil. It's very different from being humbling, because humbling, you go about it with a sense of control. You ask for someone to see your vulnerabilities. So in that sense, you've got control of it. But being caught out, being embarrassed, there's an amount of shame to that because you didn't control that, you know. They caught you with the pants down, you know. It wasn't that, by the way. And it was something of nothing. It really was something of nothing. It was just about a new group that I've joined, and I really quite like and respect a lot of the people there. And I don't know, I was just a bit of a fucking thug, and I let myself down a little bit, and I felt this embarrassment because I wanted to be accepted by this new group, and it really done me. It really done me because I don't really feel embarrassed anymore as a person. I don't get, you know, nerves, stage fright, that sort of thing. I don't necessarily not handle rejection well. I think we've gone through that before, and there is, you know, we all find that difficult, and I do sort of deal with that in a way that I could deal with it better. But I don't necessarily feel embarrassed by it. You know, I'm just like, yeah, just fuck it. You know what I mean? I'm fat, I'm old, and I've got a fucking weird sense of humor. Deal with it or don't deal with it. You know what I mean? So I felt embarrassed, and that was really, really, really strange to feel that. So let's, you know, put that on Facebook. That's how we're communicating with the world when we haven't got, you know, people in our lives that are willing to talk to us. And so his response to that was that actually embarrassment may be one of the main motivating factors in humanity. I was like, that's fucking interesting. Unpack that a little bit, my friend. And it was about the pressures we put on ourselves to impress one another, the pressure we put on ourselves to make others feel happy, to make others feel secure, to make others feel attracted to us. So when we let ourselves down from that acceptance, we fucked it. You know, we've absolutely ruined that sense of being needed or being wanted because we've embarrassed ourselves. So the fear of embarrassment motivates us to work a little bit harder, work a little bit better, be much more confident about the way we are, mask over our failures, and put on this external view that we've got our shit together, you know. And I thought it was an absolutely fascinating way to look at it, you know. Because I you know, what will I do next time when I go back? What must I do to avoid that sort of behaviour? You know, what must they be thinking of me? And I really don't give a fuck about what people think of me most of the time. It's been a really liberating way of being after 40 odd years on the planet to get that. But now, because I wanted to be part of this group so bad, I felt ashamed of myself because I'd embarrassed myself, you know. So does it become a motivating factor in how I go about behaving next time, you know? So yeah, you hit on a really fantastic point, and yeah, just interesting how we do that. I hadn't really thought of it that way, so it was interesting to do that. Now, Sean Connery died recently, and you know, God rest his soul. The guy was like what I suppose what alpha male would have been to me when I was growing up, in all of his different roles. So influential in that sense. Like, you know, wasn't necessarily a hero, but operated in that area of people that you could admire for certain reasons. Now, as we died the other day, and that was a shame, but he's lived a life, and it was people die, it's natural. So we do this thing where we have a public outpouring of grief. Diana's funeral, man, when Diana died, Princess Diana died, and it seemed like the country just filled Hyde Park with flowers, or you know, a huge public grieving display, much similar to what they do. I think sort of. I think you see it in sort of Middle East, where there's the real wailing at a funeral and sort of throwing yourself on coffins and stuff like that. Much, you know, we're very stiff upper lip, and we'll wait for the Volvo, thank you very much. It was very, very sad, but we're not going to cry in front of people. And there's this other way of doing it, very sort of public outplaying of grief. And I think things like that, things like the Diana death, where there was massive griefathon, you know, it was what could we do to up that in towns and cities. I think there was something cathartic in that. There was something about, because we've got this stiff upper lip, because we've got this, we don't trust our emotions once they become the main drive in our lives. Once sort of sadness takes over, or too much euphoria take over, and we kind of feel like we're out of control with that then. So we suppress it a lot. So I think a big event like Diana's death became something that was cathartic for the country, and we kind of done the grieving for our loved ones and our pets and relationships that have been lost. We kind of done all of that by proxy. So that's interesting that we do those sorts of things. That's always worth looking at when something happens and we get behind it publicly. Is it that we're feeling a connection with that person because we've never met them? You know, is it that we're feeling a connection with the abstract symbolism of that person? You know, so I mean, Diana was a very beautiful woman and very she went about things with a lot of grace and confidence. And we all knew that she'd had quite a terrible time as well. So she had become something that was sort of iconic. So we grieve the symbol. But I think what's more interesting in that is how within that we by proxy grieve for all of the things that we've suppressed our grief for in the past, in our own lives. And we sort of pin it on that time. So they're interesting to see when we do those things. You know, what is it that we're grieving? You know, so Sean Connery died, and it is really sad. So two ways about it. It is really sad, but I didn't know the guy personally, so it is a symbolic loss to me. But I know friends that are now watching a different one of his films every night. So that's like a tribute, which is beautiful and that's fantastic. But it also it's engaging in this very protracted grieving process, which is peculiar. I don't think it's right or wrong. I haven't got I'm not going to condemn it. I'm not sure it's a practice that I'll particularly take on myself. But is it, I don't know, is it a celebration of life? Because we do those in very different ways culturally, don't we? Grieving, I've come back to that quite a bit. Is it the Mexican Day of the Dead? Is it? Well, it's much more of a celebration about things, very colourful and, you know, carnival-esque. Which, you know, you have to love that for my type of funeral. I really would. Everyone getting, like, you know, proper fucking merry and getting on it, you know. So there's much more about the celebration of life than the marking of death in some other cultures. So I don't know whether it's maybe that, it's maybe people finding new ways to express things, you know. So that what I call a protracted grief, a protracted grieving time, a lengthened amount of time that you say goodbye to someone. Perhaps it is more about celebrating life, actually. Yeah, got that one wrong. It's more about celebrating life, which is a great thing. Let's do that much more. I think there's so much more value to that, you know. So people's acceptance, fucking hell, that's weird. Yeah, it really threw me, that did last night. Really threw me. I say, and I was very upset this morning, so those things sort of get to me. Which has left me in a place now where I've had to revisit a lot of what it is I feel, and why I feel that way. You know, because a lot of what we, you know, again, feel, a lot of what we hold as an emotion, something that drives us, something that really sort of affects our bodies and affects our motivations as people, is stuff that we're not always aware of, you know. So emotional damage, I do some work with some schools, and in the manor at the moment, there's lots of, you know, this pandemic has done something unbelievable to people's emotional security, emotional well-being. It really has affected it in a shocking way, really has, and it makes me sad in an abstract way, but it does make me sad. I'm really disappointed how we've let things slip so much that we're not communicating properly with one another. We're not celebrating the things that we should celebrate. We've lost that sense of community somewhat. So anyhow, so the manor has become quite violent. It's become quite nasty, and I think it's because we're losing our skills down the line. But it's become quite nasty. There's knife fights. There's been a few stabbings, a few muggings. Somebody, you know, 2 people were killed this year. Not necessarily as a direct result of where we're at with the response to the pandemic, but perhaps it has something to do with how we are, how we aren't now. So the work I do with schools comes into, what do we do once we're losing that ability to influence as a young teen, and going into the wider world as a young adult, and then making adult decisions, and you know, having families and getting jobs or not getting jobs, decisions that are going to affect the rest of life and the rest of the lives of other people that you touch and you are around. So a lot of it is about emotional shit, you know. So when we're, you know, embarrassed, to go back to that one, so when we're embarrassed, we quite often get angry, you know. Yeah, you saw me fall over on a banana skin, and you know, that it was embarrassing. People think I'm a fool, so who fucking put that there, you know? Who fucking invented bananas, you know? To be angry is a way of mediating and negating that that feeling of embarrassment. So that's a sort of go-to on things. Or we do the real self-deprecating stuff. Oh God, look at me falling over on a banana again. Oh, you know, which is always probably just as damaging to the self. You know, to keep telling yourself very, very negative things about yourself. So they're 2 ways of really avoiding the actual feeling of embarrassment. And I think, to go back to the violence and antisocial behaviour that's happening, I think a lot of it comes from having unchecked emotional damage. So, you know, the hug a hoodie shit, you know, the philosophy behind that was really quite progressive. I loathe to say that about the Tory party, but it was quite progressive. The problem with it was done in such a way that it failed to understand humans at all, where humans are coming from. You can't just hug a teenager who's already been very broken and very hurt and expect it all to be fine, you know. So it's a real shambles of a movement. But the sentiment's there, you know. If you are emotionally hurt, then you tend to not deal with the emotional pain, but rather inflict it on someone else. And why we do that, I don't know, because not everyone does that. Other people can regulate things more. I guess it's an easy out, isn't it? It's an easy way to say, yeah, bullies tend to be coming from a place where they are emotionally upset, or there is an absence of that feeling of love and bonding and security, and that comes out in a way which is much more sort of, you know, punishing other people. It's externalized, and there's a hate that's mediated with that, that's communicated with that. Sorry. So I think that's where we've gone at the moment. I think we've got, my estate is big. It's a huge estate. You know, there's social deprivation. There's low reading ages and educational outcomes, low wage, high birth rates, and all of the things that you would put as down as indices of poverty. But it is more than that. It is, I think, about a real intrinsic brokenness generationally that we tend to then pass on to the next generation. So we're not just not equipping them with skills to deal with or not. As I was offering you some water, then your own, mine. We're not just not equipping them with the skills to deal or not deal with things, but we're embedding in them patterns of behaviour that are in their own way broken. You know, so you know, rather than having the courage to love and look, you know, soft or weak or vulnerable or less of a geezer than you are, we go down the route of being much more abusive, whether it's that you know, negative humor about constantly sort of putting someone down. But there's much more of a power balance to how we present broken emotions than there is having the courage to present them in a way that is much more productive. So you know, you learn by your surroundings, don't you? Learn from your environment. And I think perhaps the impact that I'm talking about with the lack of human interaction this year has really made that, it's made it drawn large. It's made it really, really apparent. So yeah, we're not hugging enough. We're not making eye contact enough. We're not showing each other that we care enough. And that's really, really obvious to me, and which I find quite painful. So we talked about social media earlier on and the release of endorphins. I think it might be it. Release of endorphins. We'll go with it. And a happy chemical, which they well know and they well program it like that. Where we do most of our communication, certainly since we've all been locked down, we do most of our communication through social media. We've lost any ability, or we're losing the ability to communicate without considering somebody else's the impact that it's going to have on somebody else. So you've got very broadly drawn and divisive left and right at the moment. So if you fall either side of that middle ground, then you are either a communist or a Nazi. Now, interestingly, I'm dressed with a communist icon. I have also been accused of being a Nazi this morning. So maybe that's the bipolar shit, who knows? But that's what we do, or that's what we're doing. That's where we're at in society, in the culture at the moment. We are very quickly jumping to something that's very emotive. It puts somebody down. There's a power play to the emotional side of that, and there's no real consideration to the effect that it has. It's very easy to be a keyboard warrior, yeah. Or well, that's actually the mime of a puppy swimming. And that's difficult that's difficult, because how do we start to get that back? You know, if we've got that anonymity of sat behind a keyboard and we can say something, you know, troll people to the point where they commit suicide. You know, there's been some awful stories. How do we then start to bring that back, where we teach people that that's not fucking okay? You know, what you're saying is something, it's coming from a place of anger, it's coming from a place where you feel as though you're better than someone, and you know, you're making them feel this shame and this guilt and this self-hatred. You know, so it's a really broken emotional place to be when we're using social media to communicate with each other, because there's so many other ways, which is what I say, emotions we say that they're feelings, because there's so many other ways that we sense what one another is getting from interaction emotionally. And we see people smile, which is why I find it so difficult to go with the whole mask thing. We're losing that. We're losing the ability to show other people that they are as worthy as us, and that hurts. When I see things mediated through, you know, an idea that travels through the filter of social media, and those ideas are polarized, and we're very broadly drawn on either side of the fence, and we then start to use very emotive language that is just set to rile and anger one another and put each other down and make each other feel really low. There's very little of people spreading the love, you know, which I guess is where we need to be. So yeah, and I kind of been on the receiving end of that over the past couple of days, and it, you know, sucked a little bit, to be fair. But you know, that's where we're at in society. So you know, I can, how I respond to it is my choice. No one can make me feel those things. I can choose to feel those things or not. Do you know what I mean? I can fucking scroll past, man. You know, I can shut the phone off. It doesn't. I choose to get engaged with that. I choose to allow that to fucking have some impact on me. You know. But it is a place that not everyone's got that skill, you know. And I suppose we're talking about emotional intelligence there, which is a relatively new sort of concept, relatively new sort of way of understanding. And I guess generally it's sort of understood as in ways that you can see how you're feeling, ways that you can see the emotions that you're having, and then the impact that they may or may not have, and then exerting some control over that. I guess that's really sort of broadly what emotional intelligence, how it could be defined. We're not in an emotionally intelligent time. I think we're losing that. Just as we get the phrase that defines it, we're losing the actual skill of it. So I think, if anything, that we sort of take away from today's ramblings is that we need to help one another to have an emotional intelligence. So I don't think you teach anything by telling someone how to be. A lot of what I've learned is by seeing it modeled through other people. So I think we have a duty to do that. We have a duty to be happy. We have a duty to be sad responsibly. We have a duty to use our anger in a way that's not hurtful to someone else, you know. Because it's not wrong to have anger. It's not wrong. We wouldn't have change. We wouldn't have social change if people didn't get pissed off with things. You know, so it's not an issue to have that. What is an issue is when that anger turns into hate, or that anger turns into destruction. That anger is taken out on someone else and it makes their life shit, you know. So we can't feel bad for any of the emotions that we have, but we can own the fucking things, not blame somebody else for them. And we can work out what they do, and we can work out how we respond to those and how we use those. You know, because I say it can be a real fucking motivator to be pissed off. I think that's where we got to go. We've got to model better behaviour. We've got to model better management of our own emotions. Otherwise, we're going to lose a generation that are not holding each other's hands. They're not fucking smiling at each other. They're not hugging each other, you know. They're not looking at each other in the eye to understand when somebody else is hurting, to understand when somebody else is sad, to understand when somebody else needs to be allowed to feel fucking secure with things. So I genuinely feel that's what we need to be doing. The way that I think that we can do that is by having a bit more of a giggle, having a bit more of a laugh, perhaps not taking life so seriously. We've got to take it seriously because we are the one fucking crack that we've got, but not so seriously that we become you're worried about how we're doing it, things like that. Not setting ourselves up to be potentially embarrassed by the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions that we have. So to look at life with a respect, look at life with a reverence, but also look at it as we've only got one fucking crack at this. Let's have a giggle while we're doing it. Not at anybody else's expense, because that is anathema to everything I was talking about. But we have, and not to be self-deprecating, not to if I take the piss out of myself and I say how useless I am about things, and everybody laughs. Well, that's great, but it leaves me with this real fucking negative energy that I've put on myself. So let's find things to find comedy in things, to find light in things that aren't at the expense of anybody's feelings, And by doing that, I think that we're much more likely to, raise the vibration, if you want to use those sort of hippie terms, new age terms, however you want to say it. We're much more likely to raise that feeling in one another that we are all worth a little bit more, And then perhaps when we do that, we won't go around fucking stabbing each other. Perhaps when we do that, we can bring up our children to enjoy being around other people, We can bring up the next generations to value their own lives and in turn value the lives of others, and maybe then we don't have to live with the shit that we've been living with. So own that shit, be responsible for that shit, work with that shit, get some emotional intelligence, look for other people, don't mimic them, don't want to be them, but look for the things in them that you think, that's fucking all right, that well, the way he or she has dealt with that is a bit fucking sound. Let's unpack that and see if we can do something like that in our own lives and make them better. And only then will we not be driven by anger, lust, fear. Only then will we be our real selves and allow for those emotions to make life a little bit richer for us. That's where we're at. I'm going to leave it there, because otherwise we're waffling on for far too much. I'm sure I've missed loads of shit. I'm sure I have. I mean, there was a whole thing about the chemical reaction of different emotions in the brain that's fascinating. But, neurobiology is not something I intend to come into today, basically because I don't know anything about the fucking stuff. Loads that we would have missed. So my apologies about that. If you're watching or listening or overhearing somebody else watching, and you think, let's see what that smug cunt can talk about next week, give us a shout. Give us a fucking, 1 word's cool, 2 words are okay as well. I think 3 words, you're pushing it. Give us a topic and I'll have a go at that. I don't like to plan things, so kind of it goes against what we're doing here. So, chuck something out, let's not have a go at it. We'll talk about whatever. And I'd love to get some guests in here, but 40-odd-year-old man inviting people into his bedroom, people get a bit funny about that. But we'll move on to that at some point. Well, things will progress and things will develop. We'll move on to that at some point. But for now, you've got me, and for better or worse, you've got me. I'm sorry about that. That's where it is. So thank you for coming or not coming. Thank you for being or not. Well, I hope you are fucking being. And yeah, man, let's just fucking smile at each other. It's going to make life a little bit easier if we just we choose in ourselves to be happy, and then we choose to share that. That's going to make life a better place. Yeah. Okay. God bless. Take care. Stay safe. Fucking love each other. Smile as much as you can, because people ain't getting smiled at. All right. Ta-ra.